This spring porch cake is so colourful and fun, but it's secretly really easy to make. I'm using my very vanilla cake recipe for this, baked in 6-inch pans, and I'm using my 4-minute buttercream for the filling and the frosting. Start with a crumb coat, which, if you're new to cake decorating, is just a very thin layer of frosting to trap any crumbs that come off the cake so they don't get into your final layer of frosting. And then while that sets in the fridge, which takes about 30 minutes, make the dough of your cake. I'm using white chocolate chips, and to melt these, put them in the microwave at 50% power for 30 seconds, stir and repeat, and that way you won't burn the chocolate. Spoon the chocolate onto some parchment paper or wax paper and smooth it out, and then use the edge of your offset spatula or angled palette knife to create a rectangle for a door. I'm adding a big gold sprinkle for the doorknob. Put this into the fridge or the freezer to chill while you frost your cake. Now tint the buttercream or whatever frosting you're using to be whatever colour you want your house or porch to be. I'm using a drop of brown food colouring to make this peachy shade. I thought about grey, but I don't think I'd want to eat a grey cake. Smooth the buttercream on top of the cake and spread it all over the sides, but instead of smoothing this, use a textured cake comb. I love the shape of this one because it makes it look like wood siding on the house. You use a textured cake comb in exactly the same way as you use a regular cake scraper, reaching all the way around the cake, pressing the base of the cake comb down on the cake board and spinning the cake to imprint the grooves of the textured cake comb. Scrape around a few times and then use your offset spatula or palette knife to spread more buttercream over any areas that are shallower, where the pattern or texture is missing, and then scrape around again and again until you're happy with the texture. If you're using a metal cake comb, to get the texture really neat, you can heat up the edge of the metal cake comb using a hairdryer or hot water or a blowtorch. And then when you scrape, you'll leave a super smooth surface on the texture. To tidy up the top edge, swipe sideways with your offset spatula, or you can use a cake scraper all the way around the cake. And now, while the frosting is still soft and sticky, attach the door. Take it out of the fridge or freezer, peel it off the parchment paper, and press it gently into the frosting. Then put your cake back into the fridge while you prepare your flowers. I like to mix my colours in a cupcake pan so that there's only one thing to wash at the end instead of lots of little bowls. I'm going to show you how to make a few flowers. The first one uses layered piping or lazy piping by layering colours in a piping bag and using a drop flower tip, piping down onto parchment paper that's wrapped around a cutting board, which is much easier than piping straight onto the cake. Twist your wrist so that your thumb is as close to your forearm as possible. Rest the tip of the piping bag down on the parchment paper. Squeeze the piping bag to push the buttercream out, and then twist your wrist slowly away from yourself, and that will let the petals of the flower fan out. You'll notice as you pipe that the colours that are layered higher up will gradually push through the bottom colour, creating a really pretty ombre effect. This is one of my favourite cake decorating techniques. Lift the cutting board up and put it into the freezer for these to set. Another really easy flower piping technique is to use a flower nail with a little square of parchment paper or wax paper attached to it with a dot of buttercream. You'll need a petal-shaped piping tip and hold it with the wide end of the teardrop shape pressed against the middle of the flower with the narrow end pointing away from you. Squeeze the bag to push the buttercream out as you twist the flower nail and move the piping tip slightly away from the middle of the flower towards the edge of the nail, and this will create a petal shape. Do 5 of these to make each flower, and then lift up the square of parchment or wax paper and put it down on a tray or a cutting board, and then put these into the freezer as well. Okay, buttercream roses. For these you'll also need a flower nail with a square of parchment or wax paper on top, and to pipe these, start by squeezing a blob of buttercream into the middle of the nail, which is going to give your rose some height. And now to turn this into a rosebud, hold your petal tip with the narrow end pointing upwards and angled inwards, and squeeze the buttercream, spinning the nail to create a spiral of buttercream around your rosebud. Then pipe arcs around this, starting with 3 or 4 and then increasing for each ring of petals. As you pipe each one, lift the piping tip up for the middle of the arc and then down again, so you're making little arc shapes or rainbow shapes around the rose, and overlap the previous arc or petal by about halfway so that all of the petals overlap. The more rings of petals you create, the fuller the rose is going to be, but I want little flowers for my spring porch cake, so I'm going to stop here. Put your flowers onto a cutting board and put it into the freezer. Okay, now it's time to pipe onto the cake. Start with a small round piping tip with green buttercream to pipe some vines onto your cake. And because this buttercream is soft and sticky, it's going to act as glue so that you can press your frozen flowers onto the cake and they'll stick. When you take your flowers out of the freezer, they'll be cold and hard, but they will warm up within a few minutes and start to soften, so use these quickly. And if you notice them starting to soften, just put them back into the freezer for a few more minutes. This is a leaf piping tip, a number 352 by Wilton. When you hold it sideways, it looks like Pac-Man jaws. Squeeze the buttercream out and release your pressure as you pull away to leave a peak or a point on each leaf. I'm pressing the little rosebuds into these leaves. If you want to make different shades of green for each part of your cake, you can add a bit of orange gel to make the green duller, or yellow gel to make the green brighter. More leaves over here, and now I'm using a really tiny star tip, a number 18, to pipe on some tiny little flowers onto the bush. More vines over here, the same style as before, with some more of my frozen drop flowers. And I'm finishing with a few more leaves over here, and I'm attaching the little pansies, which were the second kind of flower that I piped. This is such a fun way to make a seasonal cake or to celebrate someone moving into a new home. And of course, I'm going to show you how to slice it. This is my favorite technique for cutting into a cake, the cutting board method, where you start cutting about 1 inch from the edge of the cake and you cut all the way across the cake down to the bottom and flip this slice over onto a cutting board and cut it there into long, narrow slices. Then repeat about 1 inch along from the previous cut. Flip this over and divide it into 4 slices. I love this method of serving cakes because the slices you get are a really reasonable portion. I find that when you cut the big wedge-style slices, there are always leftovers. And another benefit of this method is that everyone can choose whether they want a middle piece, if they want a dessert that's not too sweet, or the edge pieces if they absolutely love frosting. Tell me in the comments which style you would pick. I hope this was helpful. Ask me any questions in the comments. Join my YouTube membership for access to my course on perfectly smooth frosting, and visit my cake school on British Girl Bakes to learn hundreds more cake decorating techniques and designs. See you there!